Welcome, everybody, to the second online meeting of Art 1.2. A couple people emailed me. I'll start off with this before we get to today's topics, because I think maybe I was the cause of the slight misinformation or confusion. I briefly mentioned in the beginning of the first Zoom class on Monday the period the class covers, and I extended it backwards in time. We are not covering medieval or Gothic art. You should know that from the course description when you enrolled. This course goes from high Renaissance or mid-Renaissance, 1500, the time of Da Vinci, Michelangelo, and so forth. And we're going to get to at least one or two of those slides today, all the way up to about 2000 to the beginning of the century. Okay, so that's, I hope, clear. Another thing is that we did not cover, let me go ahead and do the speaker view here. We did not cover the one of the two topics or few topics that we normally do on a very first introductory class. We covered everything about the course requirements and grades. And if you missed that lecture, it's not, too difficult for you to make up or catch up that session, because they'll be posted. All of my lectures will be posted throughout the semester, except for the exams themselves, on YouTube by 8 p.m. on that Friday of each week. And I'll send you an email and remind you this, not every week, but the first 2 or 3 till you get used to it. It's easy to find them. I'll tell you how to search for them. And of course, YouTube is free and open to everybody. So you should have no trouble watching any part or all of any lecture you might want to review or that you miss. Okay. I am coming to you, I just want you to know, from one of the most dismal settings on the entire Santa Rosa campus. It's the adjunct art department's office, meaning us, vast majority of us, 2/3 of us are part-time teachers here, because that saves money. The college saves money that way. So the lighting is awful. My father used to have a phrase, "You look like death warmed over." So if that's the case, this is nothing I can do about the artificial lighting behind me here. Okay, so just so you know, we're not in the same setting. I was at home in my own bedroom on Monday. All right, so we're going to get to some interesting slides today. We're going to start slow, but you will need to take notes, because any slide on the syllabus, assume it could be on the midterm or final. Yes, good question. Thank you, Kai Brown. Yes. Oh yeah, do the transcription. Yeah, that's very, very good that you guys are being proactive. I'm so glad for that. Yes, I will. I think I said Thursday. I should be able to do it Thursday. Our house is a war zone right now. Anybody ever lived through a house where you have one room that's non-functioning and contractors do whatever they want and show up at any time and leave with a mess and you can't hear yourself think? So I told them, don't show up on Monday, so you guys don't have to deal with that background noise. But that's why I've been too busy dealing with, they made mistakes up one side down the other. So yesterday was just a catch-up day. And also I'm doing my first in-person class of this semester. It has 46 students, one more than there's seats in the room. So I'm trying to get ready for that tonight. I'm at Annalee Hall now, as you know, some of you. It's open. Hey, the food service is open again, although not hot food, unfortunately, but it's good stuff if you're ever on campus, until 2 p.m. All right, so yeah. So let's do this. I don't want to waste time taking roll, since we're, I said this on Monday. I try to minimize that, but I also don't want to make an assumption that if I don't hear from somebody, that they might not be in the class. I have to drop. The bottom line is, it's a college, the entire campus is a district, and both campuses, Petaluma and this one. All of us teachers have to drop people who don't show up for the first 2 weeks. Well, we have 2 meetings a week. So I mean, I have to take roll 4 times and lose all that time. So I'm going to do it this way. I'm only going to call out the names of the people I didn't hear respond from on Monday. There's only 3. If you are one of those people, please say here. And then I'm not going to call out the names of everyone who said they were here, but I will have a backup method of knowing if you're still in class by the 2nd week, which will be the mini bios that that Kai just very helpfully pointed out. You still want to get those instructions. So rather than repeat them verbally and have you forget them with all the stuff you guys have on your plates, I will send you a detailed email by tomorrow before 5. Okay. And I just need them sometime by next week. In fact, I'll say that in the email. It'd be good to have them by Monday. And that'll count as my second week's roll. Okay, so we don't waste time calling everyone's name up. So here are the three people whose names I still never heard say. Maybe they were here, but I didn't hear them. Angelino Alcazar. Here? Yeah, because that's the only kind of response I need for those. I won't drop anybody until the end of the second week. If I don't hear from them at all, I have to drop them. Okay, there's just two more and we're done. Now, oh, actually, though, it looks like we gained one student. I don't know if that's still the case from Monday. And if that person is here, they need to tell me, but hold off. Two more names from the roster as of Monday, whose names I didn't hear or who didn't answer here. Alex Ruiz. Alex Ruiz, okay, no. All right, and sorry. When I hear, I sometimes think their audio isn't working very well. Remember, I don't mute my students. So if you mute yourself and you need to speak up, you just need to unmute. Okay, one more time, Alex. And last one was Claudia Saldana. Okay. Claudia, one more time, Saldana. See how it does that, yeah. Saldana, okay. Anybody see that Big Bang Theory episode where supposedly one of them is dating an astronaut when really it meant architect? Well, those are two very different professions. Yeah. Spell correct. Yeah, okay. So anyway, nobody I just mentioned, those three names, right, knows that those people are just not answering or checking in later because they haven't sent me emails either. Okay, let's now see. Is there anyone here for the first time today? Or who just enrolled since Monday? So, okay, well then, that's it for the roll. We're going to take a brief discussion before we get to our first slide. And you'll have to take notes for this part. Just for a few minutes, we're going to discuss what is art. If you look at the syllabus, that's a topic. I always did that, but now it's required to have a discussion at the beginning of each semester in an art history class at this college. It's a good requirement. You know, I used to have students write what is art. If you choose to do that, you can, but I'm not requiring that for your mini bio because it's very subjective, right? There's as many definitions almost of what art is as there are people, or certainly many variations. So rather than trying to have that exercise take up more of your time, I'm going to give you a little bit of recent art controversy, scandal, okay? In fact, that was the name of an exhibit that happened in 2000. I know that's ancient history to some of you, right? In New York. It was an art exhibit from London where in London it caused the same controversies. All the artists were British. There were some of color. There were a lot of women artists. It was a really broad exhibit. It was a really interesting exhibit. And it was at the Brooklyn Museum of Art. Now, if you don't know New York, it's huge, right? Our biggest city, of course. And Brooklyn is a section of New York City. It has its own museums, libraries, you know, it's its own county within the city of New York. So keep that in mind. So who was mayor of New York? You know who he was if you know anything about history. Giuliani, right, who actually, you got to say, did a great job of helping the city get through the aftermath of 9/11. Made a little bit more controversial decisions after that. We won't go into that. Point is, it's important that he was mayor, and guess who was running to be senator from New York State and living in New York then, against not him, but his handpicked successor, Hillary Clinton. Everyone has heard of her. So those are people we still hear about today. So they went to opposite ends of this debate. What was the debate about? It was about this exhibit where there were deliberately outrageous or offensive works of art. The artists themselves who participated not only admitted that, they stated up front that that was their intention, was to outrage people to get them to think, supposedly. So you decide, and I will encourage a few comments. We won't have time for, half an hour's worth, but a few minutes after I tell you what the two biggest, most controversial exhibits were. So just listen, make a mental note, and decide if the second one is the one I'm going to ask if anyone wants to comment on, whether you would have found that offensive. We'll get to that in a minute. The first one, it turned out, resolved itself. It was by an Afro-Britannic artist. He was from Nigeria. His name, we're going to study him. He's at the end of the syllabus. If you look down at the end of 20th century painting, Chris Ofili, there's one of his paintings at the Museum of Modern Art in San Francisco. He's a very accomplished artist. So he did a painting called Holy Virgin Mother. It's at the bottom of your syllabus. You'll have to take notes now. We will when we get to that slide. But the point is, it was a portrait, sort of a very modernistic portrait of an African woman dressed in blue robes, which Madonna, if you don't know, was the mother of Jesus, of course, therefore very holy to roughly 35% of the world that calls themselves Christian still, about over a third, and especially the Catholics. And Giuliani is Catholic, and about a third of New York is Catholic. So keep that in mind. So it was a portrait of an African woman who had blue robes. That's the traditional color of royalty, and she's called the Queen of Heaven according to the Bible. I'm just saying that was the underlying source of the controversy. However, Chris Ofili, the artist, he was born and raised in Nigeria, and born in Nigeria and raised in London. And so he was already an established artist. He tried a traditional method of folk art in Nigeria. And I've had a number, my daughter's had 2 teachers from Nigeria in her grade school years. So I know a little bit about the culture only in this regard. Elephant dung, dried elephant dung, is a sign of the cycle of life. It's symbolic of the cycle of life. I'm not going to sing the song from the Disney movie Lion King, but the point is, it's not out of the mainstream of the culture of many parts of West Africa. If you don't know, Nigeria is the biggest country in Africa and one of the most vibrant economies. It's half Muslim and half Christian, and most of them get along very well with each other. They have for decades. So it had nothing to do with a difference in religious beliefs. It had to do with Giuliani deciding personally, as the mayor at that time, remember this is before 9/11, that it was offensive to all Christians, particularly Catholics. So he was speaking for what, a third of the city without asking them whether they would be offended. He didn't do his homework. So to cut to the chase, what happened with that controversy? He, that is the mayor, Giuliani, tried to get the exhibit shut down because of this portrait of Mary, mother of Jesus, having elephant dung that he assumed was an insult. No, there are artists who've done that. Jesus Christ in a picture of piss. I'm not making that up. I think it's in your textbook. There have been some deliberately insulting things. Every religion's dealt with. Just look what happened to Solomon Rushdie. That's really upsetting to me. But anyway, you also can see why some people were upset with him. The point is that it was religious in a way, but really it was one person, well, not one person, because the Catholic Bishop of New York also sided with Giuliani. It said, that's an insult to a huge portion of the population of the city that's hosting the exhibit. At least take that work of art, that painting out. Well, the artist came all the way, I think he flew from London to New York for a press conference when he heard the controversy. And he said, excuse me, I not only didn't mean to insult anyone's religion, quite the opposite. It's a sign of respect for the fact that she's symbolic of some people believe in life after death and all that the Bible talks about, and that's a symbol for that, for the rebirth of life after death in my culture. Well, Giuliani had to sit down and shut up then because he realized he overstated his case. And so even the Bishop of New York backed down and said, okay, well, we're not objecting to that work of art. So that got past the censors, so to speak. The exhibit was already open, realize that. It was already open and had been announced for months. So Giuliani waits till it was already open, hears about this. I don't think he even went to see the exhibit and starts trying to shut it down. Then he continued to try to shut it down over a second work called Child Molester. There was a different name, I can't remember. It isn't what's important. That one, maybe some of you may or may not agree, was offensive. And if so, feel free to say why, or if not, say why. There's no right or wrong here. And this was a portrait of a woman who not only was a confessed child murderer, she had murdered at least a handful of young children that she had tortured before she killed them. This is a very unusual case. It's, well, sadly not parts of the Western world and other parts of the world, not just the Western world, but in England, it doesn't happen that often. However, the artist chose to make up the portrait, get this, with pixels, right? Photo ink on a wall, pixels, of each pixel, instead of just a blot of ink, when you got up close, was the face of a previously murdered child over the past 50 years in the history of the British Isles. They don't have capital punishment. This woman not only was convicted, she confessed. She walked out of the courtroom with a smirk on her face, and there was a photographer who took a photo of her. That's the image that this artist from Britain, I don't remember his name, I don't want to. It might be obvious. I'm a parent. Okay, so I found a little upsetting. The point is, he didn't think about this. What are the controversies here? First of all, it's a controversial subject, okay, but child murdering and molesting sadly happens in the world. So you could just say, well, he's just reflecting. The artist said that. Oh, I'm just reflecting, pulling a mirror up into society, and I'm not, taking a position here. But can you think anybody of one reason some of the parents of those kids might have objected, the ones in Britain?
Because nobody gave their consent for their child's photo to be used.
They were photos from when in the newspapers, when those children went missing. And that happens all the time in print media and now online. Of course, these were all from a print newspaper. And no, he didn't ask permission. He said they were public domain, and legally he had a technically correct position to stand on because they were in a newspaper. But does that make it right for the pain those parents felt to be broadcast all over the Western world? First, Great Britain, the British Isles, and European tourists would come to see that exhibit in London, of course, and then all over North America, in New York, of course, tourists from all over this hemisphere come to visit them, and other countries. That's a personal consideration. Keep that in mind. And then the other topic is the museum itself already announced they were going to have this exhibit. Actually, the right name, I think I said scandal, it was sensation. If you're going to look it up, that's the title of this exhibit. PBS had a documentary on it. It got national. It was a very controversial and very well-known exhibit. So Giuliani said that was an insult to anybody, not just parents with small children. These are all younger children, like 10 or younger, the photos. On this giant wall-sized image of like 10-foot tall image of a smirking and confessed child murderer. Yeah. So he said it not only doesn't belong there. Sorry, go ahead. Did you?
And you said, excuse me, you said PBS. There's a special on it on PBS.
There was, well, yeah, I watched it live. At that time, I was teaching art history already here and at Berkeley City College. And we had professors debate each other about whether, and students at Berkeley City College. Let me see if I can look it up. Yeah, you should be able to find it. It was, I think it was on the NewsHour. You know what? Thank you for bringing that up. I think it's more accurate to say it was an extended feature story within the NewsHour. Don't they still have that? I don't watch PBS. I'm too busy these days. I do sometimes, of course, but not every night like I used to, because you get your news from so many new places. But back then, broadcast news was the main source. So yes, it was on the NewsHour. And
see if I can find it.
We'll do a documentary later after it was over. And I'm going to now wait and not tell you what happened with Giuliani. And you might guess who took the opposite position, Hillary Clinton. She said, you can't tell a museum to shut down an exhibit after it's already open. You're the mayor of a city of 8 million people, I know, but you have representatives who could have gone to the board meeting of the museums, which are open to the public. It's part of your job. And if you thought there was something, and you would have known what was coming up because they had a catalog of what was under the exhibit. So you could have seen these controversial pieces and objected then, or try to influence museum to take certain things out. But once the museum's open, that's censorship. And so Hillary Clinton said, all right, I'm taking the opposite point of view, but guess what? Giuliani tried to get the museum not to shut down. He couldn't force them that. He's not a dictator, right? Even though somebody that he was working for last year wanted to be one. But anyway, sorry about that. I don't mean to get partisan. The point is that what we have was the mayor saying this to the museum. I fund, or our budget, the mayor's budget funds about, I think it was a third of that museum's annual budget. You yank a third of any institution's budget out from under them overnight, and they're going to have to close. So that's how he tried to force the museum to at least cut back on some of the exhibits, if not close that entire exhibit. So the museum went to court over it. And I'm not going to tell you what the decision was. The state Supreme Court of New York made a ruling about whether the museum should or shouldn't be pressured, or whether the mayor had the right even to try and pressure them into removing either an individual work of art or a whole exhibit. So with all the information I gave you, does anybody, please feel free. Every one of you has, equal right opportunity here if you want to. Just anybody have, if you're a parent, for instance, you may have a different point of view about whether it, let me just form a specific question, all right? Does anybody think the museum maybe should or could have done something different? Oh, I forgot to tell you this big important point. No restrictions on age or limits of any kind on who could walk in off the street, and little preschool kids from the
Ooh.
school, public school, right up the block from the museum, were walking in with their older siblings or older kids and being given nightmares at home, their parents said, by seeing
Ooh.
painting. Yeah, so some of the older kids were using it as a, haha, isn't it funny, scare the little kids, into thinking they're going to get attacked next. So,
Maybe they should have had a disclaimer or something.
okay, disclaimer.
Disclaimer,
That's
because
wonderful.
that's not right.
Yeah, there was no limit. It was open, it was a section of the museum where the door was
Mhm.
open and the security guard wouldn't check anybody's age limit or ID or see if they were
I
with a
think
parent
that
or a
they should
teacher.
have had a
No
disclaimer.
limits. Okay, so some of you agree that was maybe, anybody else not appropriate, that they could have at least done?
Tanya said that.
Yeah. Anybody else? Okay, does anybody think that because of the nature of the exhibit and the fact that he didn't even remotely notify the parents of the little British kids who were killed?
Mhm.
Not by this one person, sorry, over the
They
previous.
should have notified the parents.
Yeah, anybody here a parent and has an opinion about whether that was an appropriate exhibit at all, or if it was okay to have it, should it have had some kind of limitations on who could see it? Anybody? Well, we have,
It would have made me mad if I was a parent.
yeah, I think
I'm
it would have with me
disgusted.
too. Yeah, well, there were pickets outside the museum, pro and con, saying, some say it's just freedom of expression. It's just holding a mirror up to societies, and others saying, no, it's exploiting the suffering
Excuse me.
of children and their parents.
Yeah.
You never forget if you lose a child. I only know one
Mm-mm.
person who ever went through that. Not my own
I think
family,
if they had,
my relatives. Anybody have any other
think if they
thoughts
had-
about what the museum did, whether it was right or wrong, and if so, or should they have done anything differently? And if so, why?
I think the fact that they didn't ask, like, hint at either the ignorance or the lack of respect that the creator had, like, he may have just been thoughtless, but it is also, like, when you're dealing with a topic that sensitive and difficult to process, you need to be extra sensitive towards the lives that were affected by that.
Yeah, I see it as the artist, not personally, not being sensitive to the suffering of these families. And also, you could say to the whole subject, but he claimed, like some of you have been saying, oh, I'm just holding a mirror up to society so that people can decide for themselves. Well, I don't think there are too many people that say it's okay to be a child molester. I hope whether you ever become a parent, have been or won't be ever be. Yeah, it's defenseless, innocent young human beings who can't protect themselves being preyed upon by an adult. That's got to be wrong in every culture, right?
Sad.
So, okay, so anybody else want to say, can anybody think of a limitation? One last question before I tell you what finally happened and we'll get to our first slide. Anybody can think of any kinds of limitations that our society by law puts on various forms of art for age limits? I bet you can. There's a whole bunch of them. Anybody?
So,
Yes.
Are you talking to me?
Yeah, I am. I'm
Oh.
looking at you. You know what? Yours says student loaner, and I wanted to use your name.
Oh, it's me, Tanya.
Yeah, okay. Well, please go ahead and tell me. I think you've got an idea.
There was an exhibit last spring at the SRJC in our library, and or maybe it was the summer before, and they were by African Americans, and some of those sculptures and pieces of art
Mhm.
were, I think they were disturbing to other people because I heard people talking about it. You know, there was one sculpture was the head of a like symbolizing like a black child, and then there was a chain on the neck, like a long chain on the neck. And
Oh,
what
I think I know
were-
what you mean. You know, it's interesting. You brought it
Yeah.
up. We're going to see some African sculpture, and there is I think I know see, I didn't see that particular exhibit at the campus museum, but we have African art and African sculpture as a topic on the syllabus. And yeah, there is some uncertainty
Yeah,
or
people,
let's just say confusion over what that might symbolize. I think if you're talking about an image of an African king, at least that's the image I show.
this was a child. It was
Oh, it's a child.
child
Oh, well,
with
that's
a
different. I
chain on
didn't,
the
okay,
neck like that.
I see.
And see, people
Well,
have
do
to
you think
realize some
that,
people view that as art.
well, okay, do you think that should have not been allowed to be shown or the museum should have taken it out?
You know what? It's a part of American culture and history. So yeah, I think
With some kind of warning or explanation, maybe?
it was no, it had to do with, it was a piece of art reflecting slavery.
Well, that's what I
That's what
mean.
it
If they put
was.
something next to it, I'm asking if you,
Yeah, there was some verbiage. Yeah, there was some.
there
verbiage.
was, okay. See, there wasn't any of that at this museum exhibit in New York, nothing. Just the
Yeah.
name of the artist, the materials and the year the piece was put in the
And
title.
I think there were some black and white photos there of little kids in cages, with
Oh.
shackles on their necks and things like that. People get upset about that, but it's a fact. It's a part of
Yes,
American history.
exactly. It's part of history, yeah. Nobody who's seen the photos of Emmett Till can not feel.
Oh,
sick of it.
God. Oh,
No,
I
no.
never, oh,
I
God.
know, yeah, I don't want to go too far off base, but it isn't off base because it's
That
a
is still
relevant
upsetting
comment.
to me as an
The
adult.
woman that got that started, that caused him to be lynched, she should have been prosecuted. And she
I
just. got
heard
it
just a
back.
couple of weeks ago, they said that they wouldn't prosecute
I
her.
know, I know.
That woman is still alive.
Yeah.
I know. And he never got a chance to get past his 14th birthday. Well, anyway, so you see how art can address topics that are controversial. Well, I still want to ask one more question, or the same question one more time before we wrap it up with a summation of what actually did happen when the state Supreme Court made a ruling about the museum, the mayor, and the right to keep the exhibit open. But before we get to that, one more time, can anybody think of a type of art? And I'm not talking about just visual art, but
Graffiti.
that there's age limits on? I know you can. Think about it. No.
Well,
You
there's
think-
sex museums in Amsterdam.
Okay, I'm talking about a medium of art in this country
Oh,
where you
medium
have age
in
limits
this
for people to view
country.
or
That
hear.
is-
Would movie ratings count?
Movie ratings,
Mhm.
yes, of course. And
Yeah,
what
movie
about
ratings.
certain types of music?
Yeah, yeah. certain types of
Supposedly,
music.
some
Mhm.
CDs can't be sold to people.
Mhm.
Video games?
Video games, there you go. So you get the
Yeah,
idea.
yeah.
The point I'm making is we accept such limitations in society. For decades, the Supreme Court ruled back in, of course, we see they do overturn presidents, but so far it's held for 40 plus years that that communities, states and cities and counties, they're talking about not nationwide, have the right to have age limitations. And I think nationally, they somehow allowed an exception for a nationwide. Well, it's not a law, it's the movie maker industry making, whatever, how you call it,
Mhm.
that chose to have the PG-13, so we know such things exhibit. I mean, are limiting of the access some people have in terms of age, only by age. Okay, so what did happen? Well, the state Supreme Court ruled this way. First of all, they said to Giuliani, back off. You have no right to tell a museum after an exhibit's open to stop the exhibit, let alone take out any individual work of art, because that is censorship, and especially after the fact. Okay, so that was half the decision. The other half was the museum's responsibility. They said, on the other hand, like movie rating, they cited those things the Supreme Court had already ruled in favor of allowing communities, and New York City was obviously in that category. It was an entity, a political entity, a community of 8.5 million people live in Greater New York. So they said, the museum should have put, well, like we heard earlier, some kind of limitations. So here's what they had to do. They had a limit of anyone over the age of 18 in New York. That is the minimum age as an adult, right? Will be allowed in without any, restrictions, but anyone under 18 must be accompanied by an adult, like a family member, a parent, or a teacher. Simple solution. So they put that notice up outside the exhibit,
Mhm.
and the protest died down. And can you guess what happened? YouTube channels. Yeah, let me do that. I'll just say it's Mark Wilson's SRJC Art History Lectures, but it's better if I send you the email with that in it, because we're running a little behind. But I didn't finish telling you what happened, because I think it's really ironic Two things happened after the Supreme Court of New York said the museum can stay, the exhibit can stay open. Giuliani, you cannot reduce their budget because you don't like a particular work of art or the whole exhibit. That's censorship, but the museum had a responsibility. So guess what? The museum membership quintupled, 500% increase in the number of people paying dues to be a member for a year. So the museum got more than just not its budget not cut, it actually went the other way. So art went out. And then the final footnote, I'm sorry, this is ironically humorous to me. When Giuliani's handpicked candidate was running against Hillary Clinton in the debate, Giuliani decided that he would be a better candidate. So he announced as the Republican senators, in the primary, in New York, and it was during this controversy. But he had to withdraw because it turned out he had an affair with one of his secretaries and spent city money. He spent city budget money on taking her out to dinner and fancy. And that was while they were trying to get Clinton impeached for doing the same thing.
See?
Without
You know
spending.
that old saying,
Yeah.
when you practice to deceive?
Yeah. Mhm.
Uh-huh.
What
I
goes
remember
around
that.
comes around. Yeah. Well, anyway,
Yeah.
enough. But I think it's an interesting exhibit, and you could write if you want to an extra credit, 10 points you get if you want to find it. There's more than one document. It was a documentary, but it probably wasn't PBS. It might have been American History about that exhibit after it was all over. And then, of course, that Hillary went on to run and win. Giuliani had to drop out, and the guy that he picked to take over lost big time to her. And she was reelected and then lost twice, once to Obama and once to somebody else anyway in 2016. Rest is history. Anyway, I think that art won out. I think that the Supreme Court of New York made the right decision. It was a balanced decision. I mean, there is some responsibility to the offensive potential and or frightening for little kids effects of some types of art. But on the other hand, as adults, you should be able to choose. And censorship is not something.
Isn't there some saying about controversy, making it more popular?
Yeah, that's what I was saying
Yeah,
about
it
exactly
just-
the 500.
That's why the subscription went up.
Yeah, yeah. So art.
I
that's
would
why
want to go see.
Yeah, yeah. That's what I think it might make it worthwhile for you to consider writing a paper about not just that exhibit or any one of those works you could find. There were a whole bunch of other controversial works too. But let's go now to our first slide for today because we have a few to cover. We're going to start
Do you
out
want us
slow.
to start taking notes now?
Yes, I would just.
Okay.
I was about to say that.
Thank
Yes.
you.
Every slide that's on the screen where I want you to take notes, you're going to hear me say, but please ask if I forget. This is a must know. That's my shorthand, my notice to you that you need to take notes. Here's how to take the notes. Keep it simple and we'll start slow. There are two aspects that you need to use in this class, both on your papers and in exams. So therefore, in your notes, you should use two categories. Subdivide your notes into two. First, the meaning. I would start with that. In fact, that's the right way to do. On your papers, you can do whatever order you want, but on your notes, you should start with meaning because that's what I'm going to start with. I'm going to tell you what the meaning of this work of art is briefly, but it'll be a couple paragraphs. So I'll hopefully I'll be able to copy it down. You can record it if you want to. It'll be on YouTube as well by Friday. Anyway, and the second category is two words. I'll say it slowly and repeat it. Formal, right? FORMAL, analysis. Formal analysis is the second category for all the notes you need to take on each slide. What that means is the techniques the artist used to compose that work of art. And we're going to discuss them in detail next week. I'll have a chart, the whiteboard drawings, the whole bit. You'll see what I mean. It'll be really clear by the end of next Monday how artists use these techniques. Is there someone just joining us here? I can't tell. It looks like I can't tell if somebody's wanting me to admit them. No, that's okay. Sorry. Got a little disrupted there. All right, so let's do this. Here we go. Here's the title. It's on your syllabus, so you should have that in front of you. It's the first slide under week 1. 2 words, Libyan Sibyl. And I'm not going to spell every word 3 or 4 times. We'll never get through the semester. I'll spell them once, but they're right in front of you. They should be on your syllabus. The first word, Libyan, like the country in Africa, Libyan. And then Sibyl, Sibyl. Libyan Sibyl is the title. The artist name, you've all heard of him, Michelangelo. you should know how to spell his name, but I'll spell it for you once. Michelangelo. And that was his first name. He signed all his work. He was so famous even during his lifetime that he didn't need to use his last name. So it's Michelangelo, 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 1512. The year is 1512. Okay, so what is this? Let's start out with the fact that it's a fresco. Now, every lecture, I'm telling you right now, and I've said this on Monday, but now you need to start actually following these instructions. You have a list of terms to know. I sent it to everybody for this class. And I'm going to give you the definitions. Today, we're only covering 2. Some days we'll have 4, maybe occasionally 5, but not very often. So the first term on your list of terms now on the very first page, you just, write them in, print them if that's how you're doing it. And I suppose you could make a document out of this and do it online, but it's easier to write them. They're not long definitions with a few exceptions that are. This is an easy one. Fresco. You see the first word there. This is a fresco. What is a fresco? A fresco is a painting on wet plaster, period. That's it. The full definition. A fresco is, one more time, a painting on wet plaster. That's what this is. So what are we looking at though? What's the meaning of it? It's a fresco on the ceiling of a chapel. You don't have to know the name of it, but for those who want to know, it's in Rome, right? A chapel in Rome. If you want the name of it, it's the Sistine Chapel, Sistine. You don't have to spell that now, but if you were to write a paper about this, you would. But anyway, only words you have to spell correctly, and it's all open book, the tests, the exams, the midterms and the final. You can use your notes in the textbook. So the spelling would have to be correct if any words on the syllabus. But for now, I'm just telling you, if you want to know where this is, it's in a place in Rome called the Sistine Chapel, where the Vatican, the Pope, right, head of the Catholic Church, does many of his ceremonies. So it's on the ceiling of a chapel in Rome. Keep it simple. It's a fresco, and it's one of 18 frescoes done, of course, by Michelangelo. One of 18 frescoes that depict scenes from the Bible, different scenes from the Bible. So that's the first part of the meaning. Oh, who is this woman, though? Okay, I'm going to do this temporarily because it gets warm in this room. You probably hear my fan, my portable fan, just for a few seconds. Okay, I'll turn it off. Okay, this is a scene from the Bible with a woman known as can I just say type of angel? Keep it simple. I'm trying to not get too complicated here because we're just starting out. So just say a type of angel known as a Sibyl, and I already have that word is in front of you in your syllabus. And that's what this woman is. A Sibyl is a kind of, you can say, an angel in heaven who can tell the future. That's her job, is to tell the future to someone down on earth. And that's what we see her doing. She's lifting a big book. You see that book? She's got her hands on it. That book is tells the future. It's kind of silly how many billions of people are there? Even back then, there was 1 billion people on earth, 1500. So somehow, well, maybe it was 500 million. Anyway, somehow everyone's future is in that book, but that's what it says in the Bible. So she's about to read the future to someone down on earth because they ask a question. That's how she knows who to tell the future to. Now, she doesn't read them like, a tarot card reader. She just answers a single question. That is part of the meaning. The job of a Sibyl was to answer a single question about the future, like, will I be happy if I marry this person? Will I die in battle tomorrow? Will my son or daughter, my child, recover from their illness? That kind of question. So just a short, simple fact is all she's going to give them. She'll answer their single question if God told her to, and that's her job. So there she is about to answer someone's question on earth. So that's the main part of the meaning, but there's 2 other parts of the meaning that you should have in your notes. Okay, one of which is, what style is it? Well, this is high Renaissance, just like it sounds, high Renaissance. Now, the word Renaissance is also on you see that listed terms. And that's a period of art, and it's only in Europe. Now, we're covering world art, but we're starting out with this, right? So it's a period of art of European, sorry, a period of European art, which revived, or you say was a revival of ancient classical art with an emphasis on Christian religious themes, with an emphasis on Christian religious themes. Well, obviously that's what this is, because it's a woman from the Bible doing something that the Bible says she should do to answer someone's prayer. The questions were, of course, always in the form of a prayer from someone down on earth. But there is another reason that, another fact about the meaning, and that is Michelangelo's personal knowledge of the human body. Let's do a close-up. I think I can, yeah, there we go. Look at her muscles and how powerful her physique is, and how detailed everything, the shape of her body, the way she's posed and everything, and the detailing of her skin and her hair, right? And her musculature, sorry, that's the word. It's all very, very accurate. So here's the next fact about the meaning you should write. Michelangelo was able to depict the human body more accurately than any painter in history before him, in Western, you have to say Western history before. The most accurate portrayer of, or painter, say, of the human body. Well, he also was a sculptor, so you have to say portrayer, right? He could portray the human body in drawing, painting, or sculpture more accurately. That's what you have in your notes, than any previous artist in Western art. Anybody know why? It's the last part of the meaning, and then we'll move on to a couple of the techniques the artists use. Anybody know what Michelangelo did as a young art student?
Didn't he like go and look at cadavers and study them?
Yeah, he did. That's how we should write that. He
Dissect.
learned how to make the human body portray the human body accurately by dissecting cadavers. There's no other way to put it. And don't worry about the spelling, write it like it sounds. He dissected cadavers, cut up corpses, okay, if you want to write it that way, but the right phrase. See, medical students have to do that now,
Yep.
but back then, only medical students were allowed to do that. Yeah, there were doctors then, of course. Artists weren't supposed, it was against the law. He could have been thrown in prison, but he obviously was never caught. Later, he admitted that that's how he learned how to portray the human body, by dissecting cadavers. So that's an interesting detail that's under the category biography. It's part of the meaning. How did Michelangelo get to be so good at this kind of painting? Because of what he did as a student. Illegally dissecting cadavers. Okay, that's plenty on the meaning for now. Some works of art, there'll be more about the meaning than that, some less. Okay, but this is an important detail. Important aspect of analysis. Now you should, in your notes, you should give yourself headings, within each slide, the notes for that slide. I already said this, but in case you joined us, looks like one of people just dropped out and dropped back in. The second category under the notes for all of these slides would be formal towards analysis. That's the techniques that the artists use. So let's talk about the pose first. What do you notice? Anybody? There's no right or wrong here. Anybody notice something very distinctive or even unusual about the way her body is positioned? Anybody? Is that a normal pose that you'd see a portrait of someone in that position? Anybody?
No,
And-
she's like twisting. her
Yeah,
body
twisted.
and
Excellent. Twisted. That's a good way to put it.
yeah, it's like she's like facing down, but she's also facing the book. It looks like she's gonna carry the book and like turn towards
Right.
the rest of her body.
You said it. So two words you used, excellent, are what I should write in your first. There are 10 elements of composition we're going to discuss in this class. 9 of them are covered in the Gill book, The Critic Sees, that I did tell you will need to write your papers. That's not due till the 6th week. But now I'm just giving you, let's say 3 of them to start with. Yes, excellent. This woman's body is twisting or turning, which means what? She's in motion. So here's how you write that. Now, in the first element of composition you should have for this slide is that she's dynamic. Her pose, actually, you want to say it that way. Her pose is dynamic. Everyone knows that word. Dynamic is what? When part of a work of art has curved or diagonal lines. Curved or this is both. Her whole body is curved. Even, let's go down to, sorry, I have to forget where that is.
Feet.
Look at that toe. Look, curve out,
Mhm.
curve in. That's showing the history of painting. And one of my students said, here's her knee, and then here's her, hip, her lap, her torso, her arms, her neck, her whole body is full of curves, as most human bodies are, of course, depending on their pose. And then also there's the diagonal lines of the book, since you brought that up, and it's a good detail to mention in your notes, that those two parts of the book form diagonal lines. So the whole painting is basically dynamic because it's full, or almost, not quite. There's a couple of, what is the opposite of dynamic? Dynamic and stable go together as one concept in art. That is one technique. This painting has only a little bit of stable, that means straight lines. Where are those? Well, you can see just at the edges of the wall behind them. That's it. Oh, and the box. Yeah, the wooden box she's resting on. That's stable, right? No curves, no diagonal lines. Here, all you see, her whole body is entirely made up of dynamic lines. Now, if you're writing a paper, you've got to explain why it's dynamic, or else you won't get a very good grade, right? So if you want an A or a B on your tests, in the essay part of your test where you're asked to analyze the composition, or on a paper, the one paper you have in this class, you need to say why you think this is dynamic. Okay, so this is obviously full of, you could just say the examples, like you should give 3 examples. It's pretty easy. You can start with her foot and then say her leg or hips, her arms. And then this fellow here, actually, I forgot to mention, is one other definition, is a baby angel. So Cherub, you see on your list of terms to know, there's one person that has their audio on, and it's kind of distracting. I don't know if that person hears that, but thank you. Cherub or cherub. Okay, what is a cherub? Oh, that person still has, no, I don't want to have to go out of the picture and then try to figure out whose microphone is causing static. Can that person please? Yeah, try to at least tone it down. Thank you. A cherub is a baby angel. It's a very short definition. It's the second one on your list of terms, so write it down. A cherub is a baby angel often found in Renaissance art. Again, a baby angel often found in Renaissance art. There he is. That's a cherub. Yeah, what is with this? Yeah, I don't know if I can get rid of that person's microphone. I don't like muting my students, but somebody's yakking and distracting.
Yeah, maybe we should all mute just because it is a bit distracting.
Yeah. At the moment, yeah. I don't know, even I've never done that because it doesn't happen very often. You can't tell, so we just do.
I muted everyone's microphones.
Okay, for now, but you can unmute yourself to ask questions. And of course, we can see them down here below, I think. All right, that was my daughter, very tech savvy, obviously. Okay, let's finish up and move on to the next slide. So we would say, if you're writing about it, that this whole painting is almost entirely dynamic. And then you say where you see the curved and diagonal lines with only minimal stable parts, which would be the borders of the panels on the wall and the box. That's it. Everything else is curved or diagonal. What about the color? What color do you notice first, or what part of this painting do you notice first because of the color? Well, now, unfortunately, we got to the
Yellow.
yeah, please go ahead.
The yellow.
Yeah, well, actually, it's orange, but it
Or
does look
orange.
yellowish orange. Yeah, you could say, yellow or yellowish orange or just orange. It's her dress. Her dress, including the underside, which is a salmon color. I think we'd all agree on that. These are warm colors, so that's how you'd write. You'd say that the colors of her dress, you could say pink if you want, or salmon underside, and the orange or yellowish orange of the exterior, looks like a satin dress, right? Are colors that stand out because they're warm. Warm colors are the ones we notice first. And I'm going to give you the list and explain that next week in more detail. So for now, just write it that way, that she has a dress on that has warm colors, and all human skin tones are considered warm because they have colors that come from nature. And so here we have, her, of course, being a European woman, obviously. Well, some people think it was a man posing as a woman. We don't know for sure who posed for it. But anyway, so you'd say that her hair, her skin, and her dress have warm colors. The opposite of warm is cool, and that'd be like grays and blues. And the background is made up of, the wall behind them is made up of cool colors. But your eye always will notice warm colors before, even subconsciously, whether you realize it or not. Warm colors stand out in a viewer's eyesight, unless you're colorblind, of course, that would be the exception. Okay, so it says warm colors. And then one last thing. Do you notice something about, I'm going to give you a hint. See where the, no, that's interesting. I've never seen him do a little hand. The outer edges of her body. Anybody know something about that?
She's buff.
Well, that's true. Good way to put it. But I was thinking of the, not the shapes of
Shadowed?
the outline. Okay, well, why don't we just say outline? This is a
There's
bold
no
outline.
outline.
Go ahead, please. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say how like there isn't an outline, like a really strong one.
There is, that's the whole point. Look how strong it is. He was the first artist to do bold outlines. You see it everywhere. No one was doing that before him. No European painter. He invented the technique of bold outlines. You see everywhere you look, you see it. Now, of course, if you're standing in front of it, like I've done, of course, you have to have binoculars. It's 50 feet above your head in that chapel with a crowd of people so close that you can smell what everyone had for lunch. But anyway, if you can handle that and you're in Rome, you'll know what I mean if you get a close-up look. But you can see it from here. That's a bold outline. A lot of painters used very thin outline, if any at all, around her body, not necessarily the entire painting, but his body too. You see that? Whoops, sorry, on his shoulder. So last thing is the outlines here on the two figures, the cherub and the sibyl, the two, you can't say humans, they're not humans, they're mortals. The two figures are both bold outlines, which is a technique developed by, can't say it's invented, but popularized, you could say, or just developed by Michelangelo. He used it on all his paintings with human or divine figures. Okay, let's move on to the next slide. I vary it from one semester to another, so I have to look and let's see. Okay, I'm going to go to, how are we doing on time? Yeah, I'm going to go to this one next. That's Queen T. We don't cover Egyptian art, but you might want to know that she was the mother of King Tut. And if it isn't obvious that she was Black African or Sub-Saharan African, as in some silly historians have said that Tut was not, well, his parents were, so he at least had a mixed heritage. Elegant face, isn't it? That was found in his tomb, by the way, in Egypt, but we aren't covering that in this class. So it's something you could write about. Anything from any period, any culture, ancient Egypt, Rome, modern, pop art, whatever. It's your choice for what you want to write about your paper. We'll get to that. Okay, this is a must know, and it's an important. We're going to cover it again when we get to Picasso, but for now we're just doing a preliminary overview, and so take notes. It's the third one down. Guernica, Guernica. Again, these are on your syllabus, so I don't want to waste too much time spelling them. Picasso, most of you know how to spell his name, right? Picasso. Picasso, 1937. This is a painting that Picasso, who was from Spain, as you may know, he was Spanish, born in Spain anyway, did of a war crime. I mean, it's no other way to put it. It was a massive loss of thousands of civilians, innocent, unarmed civilians, deliberately bombed to death in a town called Guernica, a town in northern Spain, by Hitler and Mussolini. Don't think I have to spell their names, right? Plus, which you don't have to worry about. Any spelling of any word that's not on the syllabus, on the test. Anyway, Hitler and Mussolini were the two fascist dictators in Europe, and they sided with the wannabe dictator, right? The attempted dictator, whose name was Franco in Spain. He was trying to take over Spain and ally with the other two dictators. So Hitler and Mussolini sent bombers over this village and bombed it for, I think it was a whole day, multiple bombing raids. It had no military target. There was nothing in it that was of any kind of military strategic value. So it was a war crime. No one debates that. Well, maybe Franco would have. So what happened? Mussolini and Hitler were practicing for World War II. It was like a dress rehearsal for 2 years later when Hitler started World War II by invading Poland, of course. So it was a warning And the artist Picasso was living in France when he painted this, but he saw all of the photos and newsreels because they had newsreels then. You know, I know that's ancient technology. He went to see the films of what happened. And of course, he didn't go there because it wasn't safe. It was under a siege, this town. But he understood what the suffering of his own people, these were his people, right? So he was morally outraged. That's what the meaning of this is. It's a statement. I'll repeat it, say it slowly and repeat it once. This painting is a statement by the Spanish painter Picasso, okay, of his moral outrage against the fascist bombing of this city, Guernica, during the Spanish Civil War. Of course, it was a civil war, obviously. There were two sides fighting, the anti-fascist and the fascists. And unfortunately, as you may know, the fascist won. That Franco became dictator of Spain, and he survived well into the 70s. Anyway, so this is a moment of terror. It's a war crime. An act of terror, if you want to call it that he's depicting. So what's he showing us? He's showing the dead and dying human and animals life that was lost. I think the estimates range from 1,500 to 3,000, but it was a large loss of life. They couldn't defend themselves. It was just a village in mountains of northern Spain, and they chose the fascist as a target to terrorize the population, of course, who was resisting them. So he wanted to express his outrage in this painting. And one final fact about the meaning is, well, two more facts. The style of it is a style of art that he created called Cubism, just pretty much like it sounds. I'll spell it though, because we were going to study that technique of art, but for now you don't have to write a definition or anything. Just the fact that this is one of Picasso's Cubist, C-U-B-I-S-T, of course, Cubist paintings. He invented that style. It's his own style of art. It's an abstract style. Obviously, this isn't realistic, is it? I mean, you could sort of make out a horse, a bull, a mother with a dead baby, a dead, right? This was a dead soldier, an elderly soldier who wasn't going to stop airplanes with a sword, right? There's his sword, but, was running out to try and, meet the bombers. And then this man burning to death in his own house and so forth. So it shows all the suffering and death and dying of both animals and humans during this bombing. And so this is a Cubist painting, which is not meant to be realistic. And since we're going to define that technique later, you don't have to write it, but I'll tell you what that means. It's a style of art that he invented, Picasso invented, in which you distort all of the objects, everything, even the street lamp and the doors and windows. You distort the objects by breaking them down into geometric shapes. It's that simple. He broke things down into shapes, repeated shapes, such as what? Well, triangles. I was gonna ask if anybody wants to speak up, but I want to run too late here. We have one more must know. We'll have to cut to just three slides for today. We don't have time for 4. Look at the bull's ear. That's a triangle. The horse's tongue, right? This woman's neck. It's a woman trying to escape her own burning barn here. The flames and smoke are behind her. Her head and neck obviously aren't realistic. They form a triangle. And then you have, let's see, ovals, right? Look at the eyes of the bull, or the shape of the street lamp, or this lamp here, this oil lamp that this woman is carrying in her strangely misshapen arm. So there's what? Repeated shapes of triangles and ovals, and then a few rectangles, like the window, these two windows, the edges of the building, this building the woman is trying to escape. So you've got rectangles, ovals, and triangles. Repeated shapes, that's a technique. It's called rhythm. Don't mix it up with the other kind of rhythm in music. It's a totally different kind of rhythm. In visual arts, rhythm is the use of 2 or more repeated shapes or very similar shapes. Most works of art have a lot of rhythm. Cubism is all about rhythm. You can see why. In other words, it's one of the most important elements of composition for any painting in Cubist style. And Picasso was hardly the only painter to do this. He was the first one to break the objects down into geometric shapes, and then people imitated him. They still do even now. So he became like a leading figure in a whole new movement of art. We'll talk all about him. He's a controversial.
Excuse
thing.
me.
Yes, please, question.
I was taught also in art classes that rhythm means that your eye moves around, and the painting has a rhythm, your eye will move around the painting.
Yes, good point. Thank you. That's an additional effect of rhythm. The definition is what I gave you, and you're going to get all these things in more detail, but thank you. I'm glad you brought that. Yeah, rhythm causes your eye to move around and notice similar shapes. Again, it's usually, now that probably, if you studied art like obviously you have, you probably already think of that consciously when you look at such a painting full of rhythm. Not just Cubist, but any painting can have rhythm, or any drawing, or any building, right? But subconsciously, even if you don't realize it, yes, that's a very good point. That it usually has the effect of making the viewer's eyesight move around the canvas. Yeah, that's a reason that many artists use rhythm. Of course, rhythm can also be used to create balance. So let's talk about balance, and then we'll move on to the last slide we have time for. Balance is when objects have, if they're in balance, roughly equal areas or weights from left to right and top to bottom. We're going to go over these in detail with drawings that I will have in front of the screen. You'll see what I mean on Monday that I've already created on a whiteboard. So if it's not clear, don't get too worried right now. But it sounds like some of you already studied some of these things. Well, balance is when an artist chooses, in other words, to place either equal areas or roughly, because you're going to have a rough or approximate balance, either completely balanced means that there's exactly the same number and sizes of objects on the left and the right and the top and the bottom. You divide the image into quarters. We'll talk about this. I'll even do a drawing for you while you're watching of how balance can be achieved by an artist in a drawing or a painting. Does this painting have balance? Well, look carefully.
I think so.
It does. Excellent. Go ahead. Why do you say that?
Because there are larger objects on this side and on left and right.
Yes.
And
Excellent. You said it. Everybody hear that? Yeah. The bull and just the bull's head, of course, and this woman with a dead baby, and then this man here. They're roughly, well, they're not to be exact. This woman's leg here sticking out, that's dragging here. It looks like already badly wounded leg, and the dead soldier's arm. Yeah, it's roughly balanced left to right. How about top to bottom? Again, imagine using an imaginary line. Is there more empty space up above than below?
yes.
I'd say so. So it's unbalanced toward the bottom. I'm going to repeat this when we do the Monday lecture in detail about each of these elements. But yes, yeah, you said it. It's roughly balanced left to right. And because it forms a pyramid of dead and dying humans and animals. Look carefully. You see, that's no accident. Picasso carefully composed even people think, oh, he just slapped things on because he was, a modernist and abstract type painter. No, he gave it a lot of thought. By the way, he produced over 5,000 works of art. That's pretty remarkable in one lifetime. In fact, some people say 10,000. It's in that range. Because many of them are lost. At least, let's say, probably 7,000. Anyway, several thousand. That's pretty remarkable. One other artist, I'll get to him in a minute, did something similar, and yet he only had 7 years as a painter, and I think you know who I mean, produced nearly 2,500 works. Picasso lived to be 92. Van Gogh died at 37, but he produced even more works of art during each year as a painter than Picasso. So he has, those two artists have in Western art the highest annual output. It's called for the numbers of paintings per year. It's amazing how either of them did that many each year. Okay, we're going to wrap this up, and we're going to say that this is black and white and gray. So there's no warm or cool colors, because if it's cool and warm side by side, they contrast and you notice the warm colors first. So what are those called? Neutral. The colors in this painting are not meant to be warm or cool. Black, in other words, I'll say it again, I'll repeat it again on Monday. Black and white and areas of gray, if that's all there is in a painting or a photo, a drawing, that makes that work of art neutral in terms of color, neither warm nor cool. This is neutral. By the way, it's on the wall of the United Nations, right? And that's no accident. They asked for a copy of it to be produced, and Picasso, of course, was still alive when the UN was founded. And he not only agreed, he thought it was an honor. Well, of course it was. The point is to try and prevent these kind of things from happening. Sadly, that isn't what's happened. in so much of the world these days.
But aren't there different values of gray throughout
Yes,
there are
yes,
different values.
yes.
That's what I was taught. There are different values of grays and dark, light and dark.
yeah,
greys
of
in the
course.
painting.
But if we would, you're excellent. And you know, can you bring that up again on Monday when we
Okay.
deal with color? Because we'll have more time to do each of those elements. Okay, so let's do one more. I'm going to go ahead to
Ooh,
man, many of you know already enough about, or
Oh.
maybe you don't, because we're going to go into much more detail when we get to 19th century painting of Impressionism, of course, but he is not an Impressionist painter. He never really was. Briefly, he experimented with it. That's a misstatement many people make, but you'll have to write that now. Here's what you should write. Oh, you know what? It isn't on your list. All right, I took it. We're going to get to it later. So I just give you a little teaser. My apologies. I told you guys I changed. If I didn't do it, my lectures would get too static or stale, whatever, humdrum, mundane, whatever word. I like to vary a little bit which slides I start with and which ones within each category. Certain paintings you have to show every semester because they're so important. This is one we're going to see. It's one of Van Gogh's most famous paintings, but it isn't on the syllabus yet. It will be later. So let's move on to, whoops. This one. This is one you should take notes on. The last in the list of slides, we skipped over Luncheon on the Grass because that is an Impressionist painting. And yes, we're going to cover it later. For now, though, the Guggenheim Museum, this one is not one of Frank Lloyd Wright's buildings. We're going to cover two of them later, but not until the end of the semester. So you need to take notes on the meaning, and I'll give you a few elements of
and
composition.
it should be under Impressionism.
Pardon?
What is it under, this painting?
No, it's not a painting. It's a.
I mean, this
building.
building?
Well, I haven't gotten to it yet. Let me give you the title. Yeah, I understand your question, but I haven't. Let me explain that. Okay, so then you'll know, right? So you'll have plenty of context. Let's start with the name of the building, which is Guggenheim Museum.
Yeah, the Guggenheim.
I'll spell them one time. Remember, that's like I've been saying all semester, throughout this semester. I will always spell each word that's on the syllabus once, or else we'll never get through this class. Guggenheim is the name of a billionaire, first female billionaire in the world, by the way. Her name was Peggy Guggenheim. She had the museum built with her name on it, of course. So it's Guggenheim Museum, two words. Guggenheim. Guggenheim Museum. The architect, some of you already know, Wright, of course, the most famous architect that probably ever lived, Frank Lloyd Wright. You just need his last name. See, we only use the artist's last name in this class, except for Michelangelo, because he only used his first name. But Wright is W-R-I-G-H-T, 1959. If you've ever seen Sex and the City, I used to call it Sex and the City, almost every season, a couple of the characters meet in front of this building. It's
That's
the most
right.
famous building in this part of New York. And what is it? Let's start with that under the meaning. When it's a building, and we're going to be plenty of architecture slides in this class, and you might choose to write a paper about architecture. And I'll send you all another handout I created just last semester for how to write about architecture, because it's slightly different than writing about paintings, of course. So what do you say first on the meaning of a building? It ought to be the purpose. What is the purpose? Some of you already know. It's a museum of modern art in New York City, in Manhattan. It's in the heart of the ritziest, wealthiest part of Manhattan. But you have to write that. You can just say in New York City. Once again, it's a museum of modern art in New York City. And these are the facts about the meaning you should be writing. And it was the last building completed before Wright died. Now, he designed the Marin County Civic Center, which is, I said and showed you guys right from my book on Frank Lloyd Wright's West Coast buildings. There's a whole chapter on it. Is open to the public, and there's an extra credit option. Not too many of you are likely to go to New York, but if you do, you can get 20 points. Is anybody here going to New York this semester?
I have been there many
You
times.
have, then tell us what you thought of the building, because
I think
some
it's
people don't.
fabulous.
I love it. Yeah, you did too, huh? Well, then I'm going to go ahead and defer to you to say, what is this section of the building? It looks like some giant odd toy top of a child. You know what I mean? The old 50s, 60s toy tops that kids used to have. You may have seen in movies at least, or TV shows. What did you notice when you were inside first about this building?
Well, there were a lot of people.
Well, yeah, it's very
It was
popular.
crowded.
Yeah.
It's
Well-
been a while. I don't remember what I noticed about the inside.
Well,
I remember
well, let
stuff
me
on the
ask you, do you
outside.
remember, okay, I understand, it's been a while, but this section of the building was, because museums have multiple purposes. They always have gift shops and of course,
Mhm.
cafes, and they have offices for the museum staff, but this part where my arrow is, was where what? If you don't remember, that's fine.
I don't
It-
remember that.
The paintings, all of the paintings and sculpture, it's the galleries. All of the exhibits are in this ramp.
Mhm.
It's a giant ramp. Now, some of you may have seen Mr.
Well, now that you said
Popper's
that, I take it
Penguins
back.
with, what is his name? From Canada, I can never, Jim Carrey.
Mhm.
Corny movie, but they used this building's ramp as a device to get the penguins down from the top floor in that silly movie. It's been in a lot of movies and TV shows, this building. It's world famous because no art museum ever looked like this before.
When
It-
was it built?
1959. It's what's the dates are. It was finished
Okay.
that year. He designed it in the 40s. So here's the other part of the meaning. How controversial it was is part of the meaning. The neighborhood around it resisted it and
Didn't
tried to
like it.
prevent it from being built because they wanted all the buildings to fit in with what, you see that? That
Mhm.
kind of building, traditional rectangular high rises, which is what most of New York it was until the 50s anyway. So when Frank Lloyd Wright proposed this building, the neighborhood opposed most, not everybody.
Yeah, I
most
like it.
people. Yeah, say again, please. Go ahead.
I said they didn't like it.
They didn't like it. They thought it was out of place and even
Mhm.
ugly. Well, obviously he won that battle because here it is. So how did he explain it? And someone asked a good question of what category this comes under. It comes under, you could say mid 20th century architecture, but that's too loose a term, although that's accurate because it's obviously from the mid 1900s. So it's a mid 20th century architecture. In the style, it's Wright's own term, organic, meaning taken from life. Now, how can you call this something inspired by any living thing? It's concrete, glass, and metal, the whole building. Here's how he explained it, the last part of the meeting. He said to the people that opposed it and how he got it permitted so it could be built, he said, of course it relates to living things. We're across the museum is across the street from Central Park. Now, some of you already know where I'm going with this. Look at the shape of this building. Here you have this big kind of heavy, concrete like shell. And then you have this, which might resemble a round section of an animal, small animal. What happens when it rains in a large park and you go walking and you have to watch out or you'll step on them? What kind of creatures, small creatures come out of the
A
ground?
snail.
Snail, exactly. You said it. So here's how you write that. His explanation of how this building did fit in with the neighborhood because it's across the street from Central Park is that it is a giant image of a snail. And of course, some people looked at it and said, what? And then others said, oh, I see it. Okay, so he explained it that way, and that's how he considered this to be organic. Okay, so the only other two things about this, elements of composition, and then I'll stop and take questions as I always do. I stick around afterwards. We'll probably go to about 4:20 because is this stable or dynamic? Well, it should be obvious. There's hardly any straight lines, except maybe the edges of this is the ventilation shafts, for the heating and plumbing and wiring that the museum needs, So this one maybe section right here and at the other end, but even there, look at the roof of the ventilation shaft is even diagonal, but the whole rest of the building is all curved lines. Well, this balcony is diagonal. So it's almost entirely dynamic. He almost never did stable architecture. He did dynamic buildings with many curved and diagonal lines. Now, in a building, another element is space, and we're going to talk about that more than any other element of composition. And I'm sure some of you, I forget who is now, that's been adding comments and good ones about, additional effects of certain techniques that I've been mentioning. When we get to space and how an artist portrays it in a two-dimensional, like painting or drawing, it'll take some time. But with a building, it's not a portrayal of space or depicting, it is space. So I'll say it this way, that when you talk about space as one of the elements of composition and you're writing about architecture, you will have to, at least on the test, write about a couple of architecture slides. What you do is, when it comes to formal analysis, is describe the largest parts or sections of a building. The largest section, so under space, the largest area or space within the building, right, is the gallery section. It's 6 stories with a skylight. You see that at the top. I might have another view of it, but I don't know if I do. No, I just have a closer up view. Yeah, I thought that's for another class. Okay, so what you see is several sections of the building, which are the largest sections inside the interior spaces. Well, the largest spaces would make sense for a museum is the gallery section or wing, if you want to call this. Then the next largest is the first two floors. That's where all the offices are. You know, you enter here, of course, we're doing some kind of work on it, but anyway, you enter and then the museum staff has all their offices. And then the smallest sections are the two round rooms, and you might guess what those are. One is a gift shop and the other is a cafe. Like every museum I've ever been to has both, right? To make extra money, of course. So the smallest areas or space in the building are the two round rooms, the gift shop and the cafe. The second largest area would be the first two floors where the offices are, and the largest space is going to be the area that looks like a bunch of, round ramps, which it is. If you might remember now, I forget who it was that said that we're at the museum once, but yeah, when you usually you take an elevator, you don't have to the top and walk down, just because it's easier. Gravity keeps you moving down. It's a very unusual building. And after this was built, all kinds of other buildings imitated it. Hotels, the Hyatt Regency, some of you know it, on Market Street, Foot of Market, downtown San Francisco, very directly influenced by this, as were many other museums around the world. But he's the first one to think of this idea, to have a very different kind of design for an art museum. All the art museums before this had columns, like Greek temples or something like similar to that. And the last thing I'll say, well, the color we say that's a warm color. It's yellow. Yellow is a warm color. Yellow paint over stucco, and that's over concrete. So we'll do this. Textures in a building. Textures are the actual materials the building is made out of, and you only have to describe the ones on the outside for this class. So there's smooth, real textures, and this is what you should be writing, the last of the elements for today. Smooth, real textures of concrete, because it is basically painted concrete, glass, right, and metal, the framing of the windows. So that's it. That's all you can see on this picture. 3 real textures, and they're all smooth: glass, metal, and concrete. And so buildings almost always use real textures, not simulated, and you won't know what that means unless some of you have taken art history before, or art composition. We'll talk about how artists portray textures in a painting or drawing or sculpture next week. Okay, I think we're just about at the end. Oh, is it balanced? Well, we've covered what balance is. In a building, balance, it can be completely totally symmetrical, right? Exactly the same area or weight of each building. Each half of the building. And this is not balanced. It's unbalanced because of this, the area or weight covered by the gallery, the 6th floor gallery. It's unbalanced toward the right. If you were to stand in front of it and look straight at it, you can tell from, even though this is a photo at an angle. So it's an unbalanced building toward the right. A lot of people don't like Wright's architecture because of that he usually didn't balance out his buildings. He wasn't trying to make them look symmetrical, as almost every architect before him did. Okay, questions? And then I'm gonna stop the screen share, unless you have a question about this slide.
There is, excuse me, in Santa Rosa,
Yes.
there is an apartment complex that is on Wailupa Street.
Oh,
and
yeah.
Near Whole Food, not directly across the street, but opposite side of the street of that Whole Foods that's on Wailupa. And it's the exterior is very interesting. It's not like anything else in Santa Rosa. And there are
I think I know what you mean.
Yeah.
And it was
I think that
inspired by
building-
Wright. I think he
Yes,
didn't do any buildings in Sonoma
exactly.
County, but he did in the Bay Area. That's why I wrote my
Well,
book about.
I always, I like the look of the building. I like the look of the
Extra
apartment
credit,
complex.
if you want to do this, you don't have to share, or you could with the class if you felt like it. Take 4 photos of that building and send them to me as a PDF, and just mention, of course, your name, the class, and the name of the
Okay.
building. That'd be
I
interesting.
think I know somebody who lives in there. I think she moved in. Someone I know moved in there. She was a photographer.
It might be interesting to know what year and who the architect was, but you don't have to mention that to get the 10
Okay.
points for architecture extra.
But it doesn't look like anything else in Santa Rosa. I mean,
Probably the architect was inspired
by Frank Lloyd.
most likely, yeah. He's another controversial figure. Boy, was he. I'm amazed there's been no movies about his life. Like there have been about the
Someday somebody will make one, maybe.
Yes, I know, and I'd love to be.
You know, if there's a
involved.
movie about Miles Davis, there's definitely
Yeah,
somebody's
Sure.
gonna make a movie about him.
yeah, I would think so. So far, though, his foundation would sue them if they say anything critical. That's why. they
Yeah,
were
that's
afraid.
true. That is true. People,
True.
yeah.
But at some point that will change. Okay, so we've covered a lot today. Thank you for your participation. It's great comments and questions. We therefore are going to now call this the post-lecture segment, and I'll take any questions you have for several minutes. I do have to start setting up for my evening class soon, but I stick around as long as there are questions. This is my unofficial office. Well, it is my office. Anybody have any questions about anything we covered today or anything relating to the class so far?
Is there anything we need to have like finished by next class?
Just the
Like, are there-
reading.
just
Good
the reading.
question. Just each week, look at, see, week 2, read chapters 16 on 16, see each text, each copy, each edition, each year of whatever you might have bought, you know, a 10-year-old, it's okay. I said it up here, but I didn't mention out that depending on which edition of Stockstead you have, the numbers of the chapters could vary. It'd be impossible to get them all on one syllabus because there's like a new edition every year. So you just look for the title, and it's going to be what chapters are on 16th century Renaissance art. I think it's chapter 15 or 16, but you just look it up in the table of contents. If you have volume 2, that's what you need of Stockstead. It'll be near the beginning. You'll see. It'll say 16th
Okay.
Oh,
century.
I was just
And-
gonna,
That's it. That's all you have to do is read. Oh, and Gill.
And it's just all
the
written,
chapters are all the same number in each edition, 3 and 4. That's all you have to do is read.
it's written in
Keep
the
up with it.
syllabus, like.
Yes, it's
the-
right there. And
Okay.
if you're looking at your syllabus, you can see it right there. See week by week, each week's reading assignment until the
Um,
papers are due. And that's almost 6 weeks from now, 5.5 weeks. You're going to get plenty of time. We're going to go over how to write the papers the 3rd week of class.
Mark,
Yes, please.
the book, Art History with Marilyn,
Stockstead. Mhm.
Stockett, how do you say her name?
Stockstead. I know it's an unusual
Stockstead.
name. Yeah.
I have number 2, volume number 2, and it has some African Americans on the front.
Yeah.
Is that the right one?
That's, oh, sure it is. Absolutely.
Okay, because I was like, wait a minute now, I don't know.
No, we're covering African art along with Asian art and Latino, Latinx, something.
And
like
it
that.
says,
Yeah,
My Art
Hispanic
Lab,
art.
the 5th edition.
That's fine.
Okay,
Yeah.
it's the right one. Okay.
Yeah, but what you want to do is look for the chapter on 16th century European art, and that's all you need to read in that book. And then the 2 chapters are right here. You see under week 2 in Gill, which is
Chapter 16.
I don't know what number it is. It depends on which edition you have. It'll be obvious. It'll say 16th century art in
Okay,
Europe. And that's the only chapter from Stockstead.
because I
There's
see
other
pictures.
two. They're
from-
always on your syllabus, so I shouldn't have to.
Okay, got it.
I mean, we're just starting. It's important to ask these questions. Absolutely. Okay, Emily, I'm sorry, I didn't see your question. Is there anything I should answer about that? I was talking to your fellow student. Did you have a question, Emily, that you wanted me to ask?
I did not have a question. I just said that if anyone wishes to join, I made a Discord server so that if like anyone has any questions or if they want to
Oh, good.
do a study group, they can join it.
Good idea. Thank you. That's why, I'm very pleased to be able to be teaching after 25 years at this college because almost cutting edge, if I can use a corny term, that's more for my generation. Things that people have developed to help each other, themselves, and or their own creativity. In my experience, in all my art classes, are usually really.
And that's from
good.
Emily?
Yeah, I think she put
And-
it up there. yeah.
Okay, for a study group?
Also, if you want, I'm currently working on my own notes. So if you need someone to take notes for you, I'm
Oh,
willing to
Thank
do
you.
that.
Oh, my goodness, no one.
Yeah, same
actually told
here.
me on that. There is, yes, there is someone that has that and I have their name, but if you guys can do that with each other, that would be, and that's Tanya Lewis needs someone to copy, but I think we might have, if she's still with us right now.
I'm here.
Good. Yeah, because I forgot because I had too much on my mind, so I apologize. But now it is out there. So can someone get notes to her? Can you guys exchange email contacts? Tanya and whoever it is that's,
I'm gonna put my
Emily?
email
Emily?
right here in the chat.
Okey-dokey.
okay, perfect. Well, she'll need copies of the notes as a, I guess, what, a PDF. or something.
Okay.
That's something
Are
you
you
guys need to
comfortable
do.
with using what is called my brain is drawing a blank. Google Docs.
Yeah,
There we go.
Alright.
There's another.
So I
Yes.
can add you to the Google Docs and you can just have access to it.
Perfect.
That's how I take my notes.
yeah, I have Google. I'm gonna send you my email. What is your name again?
Emily Taylor.
Okay, thank you so much. Because that is an important point that I want to make sure we covered today. And
I spelled your
everything.
name wrong.
Okay, so any more questions that are really urgent? Because I will check my email every day, except usually I don't check it on Sundays. I take a day off, but or voicemail, you can call me and I'll call you back if you have a live interaction. You need me to explain something in more detail than by email. It's on the syllabus, my voicemail. The Berkeley voicemail is the reliable one, 510. You can try the campus one, but it doesn't work off campus very often. So if you have questions, 510-717-6536. Yeah, okay. This is a very
Okay,
good. You guys are
Mark,
off to a
there's
good
something I
start.
want to tell you
Sure.
before you go. I don't know, and I don't care who's listening, but I did a lot of personal ads, and I used to date this guy, and his father lived in New York, and so I went to New York, and he said his father was a big art collector, to put it mildly. Well, we went over to his father's apartment, and there was just a trail to get in. There were hundreds and hundreds and hundreds. They were wealthy people.
Yeah,
Hundreds
sounds
of
like it.
paintings. I mean, just lined up, and my eyes just like
Well,
bugged
that
out.
would have been an interesting
So
visit.
I saw like Picasso's. I mean, stuff that belonged in museums, and I was like, oh my God. So it turns out later on, he kept asking his father, how did you get these paintings? These don't belong to you, because he knew that some of them like were taken from Jewish families, like that Hitler
Oh,
had
yeah, the
stolen, and
Holocaust. Yeah.
all this stuff, all
Mm.
these like priceless paintings. So his father would get really mad and say, I paid for them. Well, they were acquired illegally. And so he'd say, I paid for them. So finally his father died. So he contacted like the FBI or some agency and said, my father has all these paintings, and I know that it's sort of illegal to own them. He struck some kind of deal or something, and certain people came to get the paintings, but I'm sure they paid him for them, but they were priceless.
Yeah, fascinating. You
Tiny,
could
like,
make an
man.
extra credit option. That's a new one.
Ooh,
Sort of.
I like everywhere you turn, and like I said, there was a trail in his apartment.
Well, if you want to
trail.
write a
couldn't
summary
walk
of that
around.
in a way that is like an article, or maybe there is an article about the actual FBI, whatever.
Well, it was in the newspaper at one point.
Oh, well, then that would be an easy 5-point extra credit if you want to send a link to it, but you don't have to. I'm just saying.
I don't know where the link is now, but I just know
Oh,
what
okay.
I saw it.
Just an option. Anyway, thank you for sharing that with us. So pretty soon I have to segue into going down the hall and getting ready for my evening class. Anybody have any other urgent question they can? Because I'll check my email every day for the next, at least the next 6 out of the next 5 days. Sorry, 4 out of the next 5. I'll see you all on Monday is the point. But in the meantime, I will post this lecture and the Monday one on YouTube by 8 p.m. on Friday. And
Just
I'll send
type
you
your
an
name
email
and it'll
to
come up.
remind you about the mini bios. I'll do both. So you'll have all the information about how to find my lecture on YouTube and also what to write in your mini bios, which I would request you to send me by Monday of next week, if not before.
What was your
Okay?
email real quick?
Who,
Pardon?
mine?
My
Yes,
email
yours.
is- Yeah. Oh, you guys. All right. All right.
Oh, I put it on the chat.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. Is that the moon? The
No,
link?
Cinnamon Sins
Oh, where is that?
66 from
Okay.
Tanya.
Now I'm going to segue off, if you don't mind, unless there's an urgent. Yeah.
Oh,
Oh, okay. Sorry, I didn't realize that. I thought you guys were doing a separate thing.
Yeah,
while I
it
on.
was,
I'm
no,
sorry.
mine is in the chat.
Give me one moment
Can you see
here.
it?
I do not. Did you send it to a private message to?
Maybe I did by accident to Mark. Okay, I'm gonna say it right now.
All right,
Cinnamon, just like the spice.
all right.
And the second word is sins, like you commit a sin in a church.
All right. At Gmail?
SINS 66.
Spell that again.
Cinnamon, CINNAMON. Second word, SINS, all one word.
Okay.
66 @gmail.com.
That's pretty straightforward.
All righty.
Good.
And
Thank
that's
Perfect.
Tanya, TONIA.
you.
Got it?
Okay.
I think I have. I'm going to send it to you. Just let me know if you
Thank
receive
you.
it.
Grazie.
Thank you for you guys' help with each other, as well as all the great comments, questions, participation, and stories too. So like I said, I encourage that, but I do need to sign off pretty soon, and yet I will be checking. And I can make separate office hours by arrangement if you need me to, either over the phone or on Wednesdays in person on this campus. But that's, only if,
Okay, so you just want us to do some reading.
yeah, that's it.
Okay,
Until the papers are due, which is 6 weeks.
I
from-
wrote a bio. I did send it to you
Yes.
about
yes.
myself.
I'm going to confirm when I read them. I haven't had time
Okay.
to look at them, but I remember seeing it. So thank you. Thank you
Okay.
all, everybody. Okay, we'll see you all on Monday at about 3 p.m. and then we'll talk about the elements of composition. Okay?
Okay,
All right, have a good weekend.
bye. Thank you.
Take care. You're welcome. Thank you all.